Hello guys, it's your 9.4 notes. We're going to be talking about radical fractions today, but don't freak out. Fractions are your friend. They're not too hard. This is actually a pretty simple section once you get into it. So let's just review from yesterday when we were multiplying radicals. So if I have the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, hopefully you see right away that would be square root of 25. And then that's a perfect square, so it's going to simplify finally to just plain old 5. And then same thing over here. Square root of 7 times the square root of 7 simplifies to just square root of 49, which that's a perfect square, so it simplifies to be 7. So hopefully you see a pattern with these types of problems. If you multiply a radical by itself, you're just going to come up with the number, but not in radical form anymore, because you got rid of the radical. So keep that in mind when we're doing today's lesson. So there is one rule when you have radical fractions. You just have to make sure that your simplified fraction does not have a radical in the denominator. So remember, that's the bottom. We can't have a radical on the bottom of the fraction. It's a big no-no. So that's really all you have to be careful of today. So how do we get rid of that radical in the bottom? Well, I'm going to teach you. I'm so glad you asked. So for example, number 1, I've got a fraction, and I've got a radical in the bottom, and I don't want that. So what you can do to cancel it out in the bottom, we can just multiply it by the square root of 3. But remember, math is fair, so whatever you do on the bottom, you got to do on the top. So we're going to multiply the top by the square root of 3 as well. So let's see what we come out with when I do that. So the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, well, that's just the square root of 9, which would just be plain old 3, like what we did up here. Square root of something of itself is just the number. But then we go up to the top. Ooh, I can't multiply those because this isn't under a radical symbol. So I'm just going to leave it how it is. 2 root 3. Now always check and see if there's something else you can simplify. 2 over 3 is simplified already, and I can't simplify the square root of 3 anymore. So you are completely done with this problem. That is your final answer. And you know that you've done all you can because there's no radical in the denominator. So let's move on to this one. They're going to progressively get a little bit more challenging, so you can show you each type. So this one, I want to get rid of that radical on the bottom, so I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by square root of 5. We're going to see what we come up with when we get that. So the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, well, what we did up here is just plain old 5. So that's my bottom number. And then I look here, I could do square root of 4 times square root of 5, but wait a second. Square root of 4, I know in my head, is just 2. So I'm going to bring that out. And then the square root of 5, well, that's not a perfect square, so that's going to stay underneath. So always look, those aren't, can't simplify that. I can't cancel out the 5's because this is under a radical and this is not. So those are not like terms. But there's no radical in the bottom, so I am finished with that one. Alright, number 3. I want to get rid of that radical 6, so I'm going to multiply the bottom by radical 6 and the top by radical 6. And then see what we come up with. So square root of 6 times square root of 6 is 36, or just plain old 6 when you simplify. And I'm going to look up here. Well, 3 is all by itself, so we have that. And then square root of 5 times the square root of 6, if I multiply those together, I'm going to get square root of 30. And then this time I'm going to look and see if there's anything else I can simplify, and I do see that I have a fraction here, 3 over 6, that can be simplified this time. So 3 over 6, if I divide both by 3, I'd get 1 over 2. And then I can't simplify square root of 30 at all anymore. So that's just going to come over here. And that's my final answer. I have no radical in the bottom, so I'm a happy camper. There's my creepy smiley face for you. So hopefully you're seeing your biggest job is to just get rid of that radical on the bottom. Alright, so here's the doozy. We have the square root of 15. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 15. Square root of 15 times square root of 15 is square root of 225, or just plain old 15. And then remember, I can't multiply these because one's under a radical and one is not. So I'm going to look and see, I can't simplify 15. There's no perfect square that goes into that, but I do have a fraction Right here, that can be simplified, so I'm going to divide both by 3, or just use your ABC button, and I'd get 1 over 5, and then square root of 15. Alright, so there's radical fractions for you. Please come to class with any questions if you're confused or want to see some examples. We'll practice it in class. Alright guys, have a good night.